The witness at the center of it all today, a 25-year-old former White House staffer named Cassidy Hutchinson.
Wait.
She was a top aide to President Trump's chief of staff, Mark Meadows, and she was there for many of the key moments leading up to January 6th and for the day itself. We have already heard some of her previously
Wait, this is the surprise witness? Fuck, I was hoping it was going to be Lady Gaga.
Pardons after the 6th. She was also reportedly the source who claimed President Trump said maybe the rioters had the right idea when they chanted, "Hang
They
Mike
hype
Pence."
everything up for the ratings.
She is expected
True.
to reveal more of what she knows during
Sensationalize that
today's
shit.
We'll go right now to
We
Capitol
want
Hill
Gaga.
correspondent Ali Vitale. We just heard the
Gaga.
gavel,
Gaga.
go down, but actually we'll get back to you, Ali.
Dude's like, we'll get back to you.
Without objection, the chair
Fake
is authorized
news.
to declare
Yeah.
the committee in recess
True.
at any point.
You are
Pursuant
fake
to House
news.
Deposition Authority Regulation 10, the chair announces the committee's approval
And
to
corn pop
release
was
the
a bad
deposition
dude.
material presented
man.
during this hearing. Good afternoon.
Gaga or bust, baby.
In our hearings over the
Hashtag
previous
give us
weeks,
Gaga.
the Select Committee has laid out the details of a multi-part pressure campaign.
Oh, the chat's
driven by the
disabled.
former
Damn it.
president aimed
I
at
was going to do
overturning
it in the
results
chat.
of the 2020 presidential election
Wait a
and
minute.
blocking the transfer of power. We've shown
Ah,
that this effort
stop.
was based on a lie that the election was stolen, tainted by widespread fraud, Donald Trump's big lie.
Oh, well, Mike Lindell said it's the big truth.
How
So,
Donald Trump
there.
summoned a mob of his supporters to Washington, spurred them to march on the Capitol,
Cowards,
and failed
I
to
know.
take meaningful action to quell the violence.
And we can't even make a hashtag in the goddamn chat. They disabled the chat. They knew we wanted Gaga.
The Select Committee has obtained new information dealing with what was going on in the White House on January 6th and in the days prior.
I'm about to find a channel that has a
Specific
chat.
detailed information about
What do you got, ABC?
That's why, in
No chat.
consultation with the Vice Chair,
Fuck.
I've recalled the committee for today's hearing.
We got Washington Post.
Has developed a massive body
Disabled.
of evidence thanks to the many hundreds of
Who
witnesses
the fuck are
who have
you?
voluntarily provided
All right,
in the
fuck it.
attack on American
All the chats are
democracy.
disabled.
It's important that the American people hear that
Washington
information
Post on
immediately.
Twitch?
That's why, in consultation with the
That's
Vice
a
Chair,
thing.
I've recalled the committee for today's hearing. As you've seen and heard
I'd
in
have
our
to find
earlier
it.
hearings, the Select Committee has developed a massive body of evidence thanks to the many hundreds of witnesses who have voluntarily provided information relevant to our investigation. It hasn't always been easy to
Yeah,
get
fuck
that
'em.
information because the same people who
They're
drove
not
the
gonna give
former
us Gaga
president's
anyway.
pressure campaign to overturn the election are now
Fuck 'em.
trying to cover up the truth about January 6th. But thanks to the courage of certain individuals, the truth won't be buried. The American
TOS
people
word.
won't be left
Get
in the
taken
dark.
down.
Our witness today, Ms. Cassidy Hutchinson, has embodied that courage.
I would not
I
be
won't
surprised
get
at
into
all
a
if
lot
that
of
happened.
detail about Ms. Hutchinson's testimony will show. I'll allow her words to speak for themselves.
Do it
I
live.
hope
Fuck
everyone
it.
at home will listen very closely. First, I'll recognize our distinguished Vice Chair, Ms. Cheney of Wyoming,
No,
for any
Gaga.
opening statements she'd care to offer.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. In our first 5 hearings, the committee has heard from a significant number of Republicans,
Solidarity Man in
including
Black,
former
thank you
Trump
for
administration,
following.
Justice Department officials, Trump campaign officials, several members of President Trump's White House staff, prominent conservative judge, and several others. Today's witness, Ms. Cassidy Hutchinson, is another
Let's
Republican
go.
and another former member
For
of
the
President
perfect.
Trump's
Yeah, this is
White House
live.
staff. Certain of us in the House of Representatives recall that Ms. Hutchinson once worked for House Republican Whip Steve Scalise,
How's it going,
but she is
Judy?
also a familiar face on Capitol Hill because she held a prominent role in the White House Legislative Affairs Office and later was the principal aide to President Trump's chief of staff, Mark
Oh,
Meadows.
shit. Yeah.
Ms. Hutchinson has spent considerable time up here on Capitol Hill representing the Trump administration, and we welcome her back. Up until now,
Miss
our hearings have each
Hutchinson.
been organized to address specific elements of President Trump's plan to overturn the 2020
Here we
election.
go, baby.
Today, we are departing somewhat from that model.
I should probably
Because
put
Ms.
it in the
Hutchinson's
title that we're
testimony
doing this,
touches
huh?
on several important and cross-cutting topics that are relevant to each of our future hearings. In her role working for the White House Chief of Staff, Ms. Hutchinson handled a vast number of sensitive issues. She worked in the West Wing, several steps down the hall from the Oval Office. Ms. Hutchinson spoke daily with members of Congress, with high-ranking officials in the administration, with senior White House staff, including Mr. Meadows, with White House counsel, lawyers, and with Mr. Tony Ornato, who served as the White House Deputy Chief of Staff.
Oops.
She also worked on a daily basis with members of the Secret Service who were posted
Okay,
in the
let's
White
go.
House. In short, Ms. Hutchinson was in a position to know a great deal about the happenings in the Trump White House. Ms. Hutchinson has already sat for 4 videotaped interviews with committee investigators, and we thank her very much for her cooperation and for her courage.
Thank you, Miss
We will cover
Hutchinson,
certain,
for your
but not
courage
all
and
relevant
cooperation.
topics within Ms. Hutchinson's knowledge today. Again, our future hearings will supply greater detail, putting the testimony today in a broader and more complete context.
One guy
Today, you
in.
will
What
hear
up,
Ms.
cutie?
Hutchinson relate certain firsthand observations of President Trump's conduct
This is the live January 6th hearing.
regarding the
Live
actions
right
and
now.
statements of Mr. Trump's senior
We're doing it
advisors that
live.
day,
Fuck it.
including his Chief of Staff, Mark Meadows, and his White House counsel.
She's trying to hold her
And we will
shit in.
begin to examine evidence bearing on what President Trump and members of the White House staff knew about the prospect for violence on January 6th, even before that violence began. To best communicate the information the committee has gathered, we will follow the practice of our recent hearings, playing videotape testimony from Ms. Hutchinson and others, and also posing questions to Ms. Hutchinson live.
Determined, yeah.
Mr. Chairman, I yield
She
back.
looks like she's filled with
Thank you very much.
Determination.
Our witness today is Ms. Cassidy Hutchinson, who served in the Trump administration in the White House Office of Legislative Affairs
Whoops.
from 2019 to 2020, and as a special assistant to the President in the White House Chief of Staff's office from March 2020 through January 2021. I will now swear in our witness.
Girl
Witness,
boss,
will
let's
please
go.
stand and raise her right hand.
determination.
You swear or affirm
Hell yeah.
under penalty of perjury that the testimony you're about to give is
Filled with
the whole truth and nothing
determination,
but the
baby.
truth. So help you God. Thank you. You may be seated.
Ah, Spilly.
Let the record reflect the witness answered in the affirmative. I now recognize myself for questions. Ms. Hutchinson, I'd like to start with a few questions about your background. These are some photographs we've obtained highlighting your career.
Okay.
These show you with members of Congress, including Steve Scalise, as well as the White House with leader Kevin McCarthy and Jim Jordan.
Oof.
Others show you with the President
Bad
and members
company.
of Congress aboard Air Force One.
I recognize myself.
Before you worked in the White House,
I
you
don't.
worked on Capitol Hill.
I look in the mirror,
for
I'm like, who the
Representative
fuck are you?
Steve Scalise, the Republican whip, and Senator Ted Cruz. And then in 2019, you moved to the White House and served there until the end of the Trump administration in 2020. When you started at the White House, you served in the Office of Legislative
What if you
Affairs.
don't promise to tell
We
the truth?
understand that you were
I don't
initially
know.
hired as a staff assistant, but were soon promoted to a position of greater responsibility.
I know. Why do they still have to swear to God? That's like such a little kid thing.
When I
like-
moved over to the White House Chief of Staff's office,
swear to
Mr.
God?
Meadows, when he became the 4th Chief of Staff, it's difficult to describe a typical day.
for us adults
I
that
was a
know that
special
God's
assistant to
not
the president
real.
and an advisor to the
What
Chief
would
of
swearing to
Staff.
God even do? Nothing.
The days depended on what the president was doing that day, and that's kind of how my portfolio was reflected. I had a lot of
Someone better
outreach
be
with members
going
of
to
Congress,
jail.
senior cabinet officials. I would work on policy issues with
Let me get
relevant
a
internal
bone,
components
bone.
and members on the Hill. as well as security
Damn,
protocol at the White House
damn.
complex for Mr. Meadows and the president.
What do we sell? Yeah,
And then
where we gonna go?
you
We
received
gonna go
another
back to
promotion in
jail.
March 2020. At that time, you became the principal aide
I swear to
the
mommy.
new White House Chief of Staff,
See?
Mark Meadows. Is that right?
That's correct, sir.
You know, yeah, because I can actually see a mommy. That helps the credibility along a little bit. You know what I'm saying?
With what was going on, we spent a
You
lot
can
of time
actually
on the
see
Hill.
them?
I spent time on the Hill independently too, as I was his liaison for Capitol Hill. We did a lot of presidential travel engagements, but mostly I was there to serve what the chief of staff needed, and a lot of times what the chief of staff needed was a reflection of what the president's schedule is detailed to do that day.
So is it fair to say that you spoke regularly in your position, both with members of Congress and with senior members of
Oh
the
my
Trump
God.
administration?
Yeah, we
That's
watched
correct.
the
That's a fair
most.
assessment, sir.
And would you say
We watched the cringiest MGTOW video earlier. Oh,
contact with him and others
It
in
was-
the White House throughout the day?
That's
Like-
correct, sir. Mr. Meadows and I were in contact
like all MGTOW videos are cringe, but that one
pretty
was
much
like
throughout every day, consistently.
amazingly fucking
Although so
cringe.
much of grave importance happens in the West Wing of the White House, it's quite a small building. Above me on the screen, you can see a map of the first floor of the West Wing of the White House. On the right,
Oh,
you can
shit,
see the
there's the Oval
president's
Office.
Oval Office. On the left,
Wait a
the
minute.
chief of staff's
They're
office.
giving Chuds a map to the Oval Office. What the fuck?
Office
Chuds
suite.
are gonna use this.
It's the heart of the
Like,
West
all right.
Wing,
We go through the
was your
dining
desk,
room, in the
which
study,
is
and
between the
boom.
vice president's office, Ms. Kirshner's office, and the Oval Office.
Come on,
Ms.
man.
Hutchinson, is this in
Let's go, Brandon. I agree.
where you were located?
It's accurate. It's a lot smaller than it looks.
Absolutely.
I know. They're giving Chuds the layout.
Ms. Hutchinson, this is a photo that shows
Actually, let's be real. Chuds ain't watching this. Fox News is probably not even covering it. They didn't last time. So
and it only takes 5 to 10 seconds of
Fox News is gonna take their ads off and play Tucker Carlson again.
office. Is that right?
That's correct.
Thank you.
You can get
Pursuant
info.
to the
No, I
Section
know, I'm fucking around.
5C8 of House Resolution 503, the chair recognizes gentlewoman from Wyoming.
Chuds ain't even
Ms.
watching
Cheney,
this
for
anyway.
questions.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Chairman, we will begin today
The only
with an
Chuds watching this
exchange
are the
that
ones
first provided Ms. Hutchinson
fucking
a
lurking in
tangible
the chat,
sense
trying to
of
get
the
me
ongoing planning for the events
fucking
of
banned.
January 6th. On January 2nd, 4 days before the attack on our Capitol, President Trump's lead lawyer, Mr. Giuliani, was meeting with White House Chief of Staff Mark Meadows and others. Ms. Hutchinson, do you remember Mr. Giuliani meeting with
Capital
Mr.
maps,
Meadows
and they
on
still
January
couldn't
2nd,
find Congress
2021?
too stupid.
I do. He met with Mr. Meadows in
True.
the evening of January 2nd, 2021.
And we understand that you walked Mr. Giuliani out of the White House that night.
I walked
and he talked to
Giuliani
you
to
about
the
January
White
6th.
House in
What do you remember him saying?
1975. Who the
As
fuck
Mr.
are you?
Giuliani and I were walking to his vehicles that evening, he looked at me and said something to the effect of, "Cass, are you excited for the 6th? It's going to be a great day." I remember
Who the
him
fuck are
saying,
you?
"Rudy, could you explain what's happening on the 6th?"
What else did he say?
And he had responded something to the effect of, "We're going to the Capitol. It's going to be great. The president's going to be there. He's going to look powerful. He's going to be with the members. He's going to be with the senators."
Such
Talk to the
weirdos,
chief
dude.
about
He
it.
gonna
Talk
look
to the chief about
powerful.
it. He knows about it.
And did you go back then up to the
He's
West
gonna
Wing and
look
tell
so
Mr. Meadows about your
powerful.
conversation with Mr. Giuliani?
So
I did.
dominating.
After Mr. Giuliani had left the campus that evening, I went back up to our office and I found
Daddy
Mr.
gonna
Meadows
look
in his
so
office on the couch.
powerful.
He was scrolling through his phone. I remember leaning against the doorway and saying, "I just had an interesting conversation with Rudy, Mark. Sounds like we're going to go to the Capitol." He didn't look up from his phone and said something to the effect of, "There's a lot going on, Cass, but I don't know. Things might get real bad on January 6th."
Ms. Hutchinson, Mr. Meadows is engaged in litigation with the committee to try to avoid testifying here.
Oh, man.
What was your reaction when he said to you things might get real bad?
Fart.
In the days before January 2nd, I was at apprehensive about the 6th. I had heard general plans for a rally. I had tentative movements to potentially go to the Capitol.
Damn, girl,
But
what the fuck?
when hearing Rudy's take on January 6th and then Mark's response, that evening was the first moment that I remember feeling scared and nervous for what could happen on January 6th. And I had a deeper concern for what was happening with the planning aspects of it.
Daddy gonna look so dominant.
Thank you, Ms. Hutchinson. Today, we're going to be focusing primarily on the events of January 5th and 6th at the White House. But to begin and to frame the discussion, I want to talk about a conversation that you had with Mr. John Ratcliffe, the Director of National Intelligence. And you had this conversation in December of 2020. Mr. Ratcliffe was nominated by President Trump
Jordan
to
Klepper showed
oversee
maggot
U.S.
video of
intelligence,
Ivanka
our U.S.
admitting the
intelligence
election
community.
wasn't stolen. Oh!
And before his appointment, Mr. Ratcliffe
They
was a Republican
showed it
member
on the
of Congress.
the very
As you
first
will
thing.
see
It was
on this clip, Director Ratcliffe's
they showed Ivanka admitting. That's what that was from this.
My understanding was
I think.
Director Ratcliffe
Of course,
didn't
Mike
want
is
much to
involved.
do
I know.
with the post-election period.
I wouldn't be surprised if he was
Ratcliffe
behind the
thought
whole
that
thing.
It wasn't something that the White House should be pursuing. It felt it was dangerous for the president's legacy. He
Rudy?
had expressed
No.
to me that he was concerned that it could spiral out of control.
No, Trump.
And potentially be dangerous, either for our democracy or with the way that things were going for the 6th.
You are fake news.
It wasn't something the White House should be pursuing. What's the it?
Trying to fight the results of the election, finding missing ballots, pressuring.
What's up, Mr. Crinkle? Oh shit, I missed the.
He's pulling his cock out!
In certain states where there didn't seem to be significant evidence, and reaching out to state legislatures about that. So pretty much the way that the White House is handling the
Billy,
post-election
please calm
period,
down over
felt
there.
That there could be dangerous repercussions
Very
in
dog.
terms of precedent set for
He's a
elections,
switch.
for our democracy.
Trump's a switch.
For the 6th.
He likes to get peed on too, well, as far as I know.
So, Ms. Hutchinson, now we're going to turn to
So
certain
I've heard.
information that was available before January 4th.
I don't know from experience or anything.
And what the Trump administration and the president knew about the potential for violence before January 6th. On the screen, you will see an email received by Acting Deputy Attorney General Donahue on January 4th from the National Security Division of the Department of
He
Justice.
demands to be
Mr.
peed
Donahue
on. I
testified in our
know.
hearings last week.
So
The
dominated.
email identifies apparent planning by those coming to Washington on January 6th to, quote, occupy federal buildings, and discussions of, quote, invading the Capitol building. Here's what Mr. Donahue said to us.
Mr. Donahue.
And we knew that if you have tens of thousands of very upset people showing up in Washington, D.C., that there was potential for violence.
The U.S. Secret Service was looking at similar information and watching the planned demonstrations. In fact, their intelligence division sent several emails to White House personnel, like Deputy Chief of Staff Tony Ornato, and the head of the President's Protective Detail, Robert Engel, including certain materials listing events like those on the screen. The White House continued to receive updates about planned demonstrations, including information regarding the Proud Boys organizing and planning to attend events on January 6th. Although Ms. Hutchinson has no detailed knowledge of any planning involving the Proud Boys for January 6th, she did note this.
I recall hearing the word Oath Keeper and hearing the word Proud Boys closer to the planning of the January 6th rally when Mr. Giuliani would be around.
Wrong.
On January 3rd, the Capitol Police issued a special event assessment. In that document, the Capitol Police noted that the Proud Boys and other groups planned to be in Washington, D.C. on January 6th, and indicated that, quote, unlike previous post-election protests, the targets of the pro-Trump supporters are not necessarily the counter-protesters as they were previously.
Save it for
but
Trump.
Rather, Congress itself is the target on the 6th.
Not.
Of course, we all know now that the Proud Boys showed up on January 6th, marched from the Washington Monument to the Capitol that day, and led the riotous mob to invade and occupy our Capitol.
Daddy, chill.
Ms. Hutchinson, I want to play you a clip of one of our meetings when you described a call on January 4th that you received from National Security Advisor Robert O'Brien on the same topic, potential violence on January 6th.
I received
Burger
a call
Light
from Robert O'Brien, the National Security Advisor. He had asked if he could speak with Mr. Meadows about potential words of violence that he was hearing that were potentially going to happen on the Hill on January 6th. I had asked if he had connected with Tony Ornato because Tony Ornato had a conversation with him, with Mark about that topic. Robert had said, I'll talk to Tony, and then I don't know if Robert ever connected
Rudy
with
dressed
Mark
in drag. Yeah, I showed that on here before.
Ms. Hutchinson, can you describe
Trump and
Mr.
Rudy.
Ornato's responsibilities as Deputy Chief of Staff?
The Deputy Chief
That's
of
a good
Staff
video.
position at the White House for operations.
We should show. I'll show it again.
Arguably one of the most important positions that somebody can
Don't
hold.
remind me.
They're in charge of all security protocol for the campus and
You don't
all
like that?
presidential protectees, primarily the president and the first family, but anything that requires security for any individual that has presidential protection, so the chief of staff or the national security advisor, as well as the vice president's team too. Tony would oversee all of that, and he was the conduit for security protocol between White House staff and the United States Secret Service.
Thank you. And you also described a brief meeting between Mr. Ornato and Mr. Meadows on the potential for violence. The meeting was on January 4th. They were talking about the potential for violence on January 6th. Let's listen to a clip of that testimony.
I remember Mr. Ornato had talked in about intelligence reports. I remember Mr. Ornato coming in and saying that we had intel reports saying that there could potentially be violence on the 6th.
You also told us about reports of violence and weapons that the Secret Service were receiving on the night of January 5th and throughout the day on January 6th. Is that correct?
That's correct.
There are reports that police in Washington, D.C. had arrested several people with firearms or ammunition following a separate pro-Trump rally in Freedom Plaza on the evening of January 5th. Are those some of the reports that you recall hearing about?
They are.
Of course, the world now knows that the people who attacked the Capitol on January 6th had many different types of weapons. When a president speaks, the Secret Service typically requires those attending to pass through metal detectors, known as magnetometers, or MAGs for short.
Magnetometers.
The Select Committee has learned that people who willingly entered the enclosed area for President Trump's speech were screened so they could attend the rally at the Ellipse. They had weapons and other items that were confiscated: pepper spray, knives, brass knuckles, tasers, body armor, gas masks, batons, blunt weapons.
Blunts.
Those were just from the people who chose to go through the security for the president's event on the Ellipse, not the several thousand members of the crowd who refused to go through the MAGs and watched from the lawn near the Washington Monument. The Select Committee has learned about reports from outside the magnetometers and has obtained police radio transmissions.
They had blunts?
Identifying individuals with firearms, including AR-15s, near the Ellipse on the morning of January 6th. Let's listen.
An individual is entering, to be a white male, about 6 feet tall, 10 bills, brown cowboy boots. He's got blue jeans and a blue jean jacket, and underneath the blue jean jacket, the complainants both saw a stock of an AR-15. He's going to be with a group of individuals, about 5 to 8 other individuals, Two of the individuals in that group at the base of the tree near the porta potties were wearing green fatigues, green olive drab style fatigues, about 5'8", 5'9", skinny white males, brown cowboy boots. They had Glock style pistols in their waistband.
8736 with the message that subject weapon on his right hip. After that, he's in the tree.
Motor 1, make sure BPD knows they have an elevated threat in the tree south side of Constitution Avenue. Look for the "Don't Tread on Me" flag, American flag face mask, cowboy boots, weapon on the right side hip.
We got 3 men walking down the street in fatigue while carrying AR-15. Copy at 14th and Independent.
AR-15s at
Skinny
14th
white
and
male.
Independence. As you saw in those emails, the first report that we showed, we now know was sent in the 8 o'clock hour on January 6th. This talked about people in the crowd wearing ballistic helmets and body armor.
Look for the
carrying
cowboy
radio
boots.
equipment and military-grade backpacks.
And the "Don't Tread on Me"
The second
flag.
report we showed you on the screen was sent by the Secret Service in the 11 a.m. hour.
Fucking
It
idiots,
addressed
dude,
reports
for
of a
real.
man with a rifle
Such
near the
dorks,
ellipse.
yeah.
Ms. Hutchinson, in prior testimony, you described for us a meeting in the White House around 10 a.m. in the morning of January 6th, involving Chief of Staff Meadows and Tony Ornato. Were you in that meeting?
I was.
Let's listen to your testimony about that meeting, and then we'll have some questions.
I think the last time we talked, you mentioned that some of the weapons that people had at the rally included flagpoles, oversized sticks or flagpoles, bear spray. Is there anything else that you recall hearing about the people who would gather on the ellipse had?
I recall Tony and I having a conversation with Mark probably around 10 a.m., 10:15 a.m., where I remember Tony mentioning knives, guns in the form of pistols and rifles, bear spray, body armor, spears, and flagpoles. Spears were one item, flagpoles were one item, and then Tony had relayed to me something to the effect of, and these effing people are fastening spears onto the ends of flagpoles.
Ms. Hutchinson, here's a clip of your testimony regarding Mr. Meadows' response to learning that the rally attendees were armed that day.
What was Mark's reaction, Mr. Meadows' reaction to this list of weapons that people had in the crowd?
When Tony and I went in to talk to Mark that morning, Mark was sitting on his couch and on his phone, which is something typical. And I remember Tony just got right into it. Was like,
It's
sorry,
Brittany,
someone, you know,
bitch.
and informed him, like, this is how many people we have outside the mags right now. These are the weapons that we're known to have. It's possible he listed more weapons off that I just don't recall. And gave him a brief but and concise explanation, but also fairly thorough. And I remember distinctly Mark not looking up from his phone. And I remember Tony finishing his explanation and it taking a few seconds for Mark to say something to the point where I almost said, "Mark, did you hear him?" And then Mark chimed in and was like, "All right, anything else?" Still looking down at his phone. And Tony looked at me and I looked at Tony, and Tony said, "No, sir, do you have any questions?" It's like,
Fastening their spears.
He's pulling his cock out!
Sir, he just told you about what was happening down at the rallies. And he was like, yeah, I know. And then he looked up and said, "Have you talked to the president?"
Totally peaceful.
And Tony said, "Yes, sir, he's aware too." He said, "All right, good."
He asked Tony if Tony had informed the president.
Yes.
And Tony said yes, he had.
So, Ms. Hutchinson, is it your understanding that Mr. Ornato told the president about weapons at the rally on the morning of January 6th?
That's what Mr. Ornato relayed to me.
And here's how you characterize Mr. Meadows' general response when people raised concerns about what could happen on January 6th.
Sarcastically.
So at the time in the days leading up to this,
It's just a joke, bro.
Lots of public reports about how
It's
things
just
might
jokes,
go
bro.
bad on the 6th, even the potential for violence.
Jokes,
If I'm
bro.
hearing you correctly, what stands out to you is that Mr. Meadows
No, my
did not
bro.
share those concerns, or at least did not act on those concerns.
Just boys and their toys.
Did not act on those concerns with me. accurate.
Boys and their
But other people
toys,
reason
baby.
To him, like in this exchange, you mentioned Mr. Tornado pulled aside.
That's correct.
Ms. Hutchinson, we're going to show now an exchange of texts between you and Deputy Chief of Staff Ornato. And these text messages were exchanged while you were at the ellipse. In one text, you write, "But the crowd looks good from this vantage point as long as we get the shot. He was effing furious." And the text messages also stress that President Trump kept mentioning the OTR, an off-the-record movement. We're going to come back and ask you about that in a minute. But could you tell us, first of all, who it is in the text who was furious?
The he in that text that I was referring to was the president.
And why was he furious, Ms. Hutchinson?
He was furious because he wanted the arena that we had on the ellipse to be maxed out at capacity for all attendees. The advance team had relayed to him that the mags were free-flowing. Everybody who wanted to come in had already come in, but he still was angry about the extra space and wanted more people to come in.
And did you go to the rally in the presidential motorcade?
I was there, yes, in the motorcade.
And were you backstage with the president and other members of his staff and family?
I was.
Fun.
And you told us, Ms. Hutchinson, about particular comments that you heard while you were in the tent area.
Wait, what's the... Okay, I'm gonna shut the window.
When we were in the offstage announce area tent behind the stage, he was very concerned about the shot, meaning the photograph that we would get, because the rally space wasn't full. One of the reasons, which I've previously stated, was because he wanted it to be full and
Clam Slammer?
feel excluded.
Well, nice rap sheet,
Clam
Clam Slammer.
At the rally.
What do you...
And he felt the mags were at fault for not letting everybody in. But another leading reason,
Okay.
and likely the primary reason, is because
He's pulling his cock out!
And he was angry that we weren't letting people through the mags with weapons, what the Secret Service deemed as weapons and our weapons. But when we were in the offstage announce tent,
Clam Slammer 69.
I was in the vicinity of a conversation where I overheard the president say something to the effect of, you know, I don't effing care that they have weapons. They're not here to hurt me. Take the effing mags away. Let my people in. They can march to the Capitol from here. Let the people in. Take the effing mags away.
Amazing.
Just to be clear, Ms. Hutchinson, is it your understanding that the president wanted to take the mags away and said that the armed individuals were not there
nice
to
name.
hurt him?
That's a fair assessment.
The issue wasn't with the amount of space available in the official rally area only, but instead that people did not want to have to go through the mags. Let's listen to a portion of what you told us about that.
In this particular instance, it wasn't the capacity of our space, it was the mags and the people that didn't want to come through. And that's what Tony had been trying to relay to him that morning. You know, it's not the issues that we encountered on the campaign. We have enough space, or they don't want to come in right now. They have weapons that they don't want confiscated by the Secret Service, and they're fine on the mall. They can see you on the mall, and they want to march straight to the Capitol from the mall.
The president apparently wanted all attendees inside the official rally space and repeatedly said, quote, "They're not here to hurt me."
What a stupid son of a bitch.
And just to be clear, so
The
he
mags?
was told again in that conversation, or was he told again in that conversation that people couldn't come through the mags because they had weapons?
Correct.
And that people...
Arun, what up, homie?
To say they can march to the Capitol from the ellipse.
Something to the effect of, take the effing mags away. They're not here to hurt me. Let them in. Let my people in. They can march to the Capitol after the rally's over. They can march from the ellipse. Take the effing mags away. Then they can
Don't
march
be
to the
rude.
Capitol.
Ms. Hutchinson, what we saw when those clips were playing were photos provided by the National Archives showing the president in the offstage tent before his speech on the ellipse. You were in some of those photos as well.
Oh, you're good.
I just want to confirm
Hell
that is
yeah,
when you heard
homie.
the president say the people with weapons weren't there to hurt him.
Oh, I hope
and
you have
they
a good
wanted the Secret
time,
Service
homie.
to remove the magnetometers.
That's correct. In the photos that you displayed,
Take
we
the
were standing
effing
towards
mags,
front of
the
tent with
mags
TVs,
away. Hell no.
Really close to where he would walk out to go
No
onto the
purse.
stage.
No purse is
These
right.
conversations happened 2 to 3 minutes before he took the stage that morning.
Let's reflect on that for a moment. President Trump was aware that a number of the individuals in the crowd had weapons and were wearing body armor. And here's what President Trump instructed the crowd to do.
We're going to walk down, and I'll be there with you. We're going to walk down. We're going to walk
Yeah, he's like,
down.
I'll be there with you.
Anyone you want, but I think
These
right
idiots
here,
are
we're
actually
gonna
going to
walk
do it. Let's
down
get the fuck out of
to
here.
the Capitol.
Wrong.
And the crowd, as we know, did proceed to the Capitol. It soon became apparent to the Secret Service, including the Secret Service teams in the crowd, along with White House staff, that security at the Capitol would not be sufficient.
I'd had 2 or 3 phone conversations with Mr. Ornato when we were at the Ellipse, and then I had 4 men on Mr. Meadows' detail with me in between those individuals and then a few other.
Hell yeah, homie.
Just the Secret Service doing advance.
I hope you have a.
They were getting
I hope you have a good time.
through their radios, and Mr.
Be careful.
One phone conversation had called me and said, "Make sure the chief knows that they're getting close to the Capitol." It's,
Yeah, wear a mask. Rona popping off for real.
having trouble stacking bodies.
And Ms. Hutchinson, when you said they were having trouble stacking bodies.
Stacking
did you mean that
bodies?
Law enforcement at the Capitol needed more people to defend the Capitol from the rioters?
It was becoming clear to us and to the Secret Service that Capitol police officers were getting overrun at the security barricades outside of the Capitol building, and they were having short people to defend the building against the rioters.
And you mentioned that Mr. Ornato was conveying this to you because he wanted you to tell Mr. Meadows. So did you tell Mr. Meadows that people were getting closer to the Capitol and that Capitol Police was having difficulty?
After I had the conversation with Mr. Meadows, after I had the conversation with Mr. Ornato, I went to have the discussion with Mr. Meadows. He was in a secure vehicle at the time making a call. So when I had gone over to the car, I went to open the door to let him know, and he had immediately shut it. I don't know who he was speaking with. It wasn't something that he regularly did, especially when I would go over to give him information. So I was a bit taken aback, but I didn't think much of it, and thinking that I would be able to have the conversation with him a few moments later.
And were you able to have that conversation a few moments later?
Probably about 20 to 25 minutes later. There was another period in between where he shut the door again, and then when he finally got out of the vehicle, we had the conversation. But at that point, there was a backlog of information that he should have been made aware of.
And so you opened the door to the control car, and Mr. Meadows pulled it shut?
That's correct.
And he did that 2 times?
That's correct.
And when you finally were able to give Mr. Meadows the information about the violence at the Capitol, what was his reaction?
He almost had a lack of reaction. I remember him saying, "All right," something to the effect of, "How much longer does the president have left in his speech?"
Again, much of this information about the potential for violence was known or learned before the onset of the violence, early enough for President Trump to take steps to prevent it. He could, for example, have urged the crowd at the Ellipse not to march to the Capitol. He could have condemned the violence immediately once it began, or he could have taken multiple other steps. But as we will see today and in later hearings, President Trump had something else in mind. One other question at this point, Ms. Hutchinson, were you aware of concerns that White House counsel Pat Cipollone or Eric Hirschman had about the language President Trump used in his Ellipse speech?
There were many discussions the morning of the 6th about the rhetoric of the speech that day. In my conversations with Mr. Hirschman, he had relayed that we would be foolish to include language that had been included at the president's request, which had lines along to the effect of, fight for Trump. We're going to march to the Capitol. I'll be there with you. Fight for me. Fight for what we're doing. Fight for the movement.
What a
Things
stupid
about
son of a
Vice
bitch.
President at the time, too. Both Mr. Hirschman and White House counsel's office were urging the speechwriters to not include that language for legal concerns and also for the optics of what it could portray the president wanting to do that day.
They're really milking this? What do you mean?
And we just heard the president say that he would be with his supporters as they marched to the Capitol. Even though he did not end up going, he certainly wanted to.
This ain't shit, dude.
Some have questioned whether President Trump
They really
genuinely
milked the
plans
Johnny
to
Depp
come
trial.
here to the Capitol on January 6th. In his book, Mark Meadows falsely wrote that
This is
after
like the
President Trump
6th.
gave his speech on January 6th, he told Mr. Meadows
Too many
he was,
words.
quote, speaking metaphorically about the walk to the Capitol. As you will see, Donald Trump was not speaking metaphorically. As we heard earlier,
He said,
Giuliani
I'm
told Ms.
speaking
Hutchinson
metaphorically.
Mr. Trump plans
Go
to
down to
travel
the Capitol.
Capitol on January 6th. I want to pause for just a moment.
I meant metaphorically march down to the
Some of the
Capitol.
terminology you will hear today. We've heard you use two different terms to describe plans for the president's movement.
It's all fake
Capitol
news.
or anywhere
It's
else.
phony stuff.
One of those is a
It didn't
scheduled
happen.
movement, and another one is OTR. Could you describe for us what each of those mean?
A scheduled presidential movement is on his official
Too
schedule.
bigly.
It's
The words
notified
are
to
too
the press
bigly.
and to a wide range of staff that will be traveling with him. It's known to the public, known to the Secret Service,
news,
and they're
brother.
able to coordinate the movement days in advance. An off-the-record movement is confined to the knowledge of a very, very small group of advisors and staff. Typically, a very small
Yeah.
group of staff would travel with him.
Metaphorically, he said, I meant metaphorically, Mike Pence.
You can pull an off-the-record movement together in
Dude, this is
less
fucking
than an hour.
crazy.
It's a way
Holy
to kind of
shit.
circumvent having to release it to the press if that's the goal
Oh,
of it,
yeah,
or
I hope you have a good time, homie.
to not have to have as many security parameters put in place
careful.
ahead of time to make the movement happen.
Watch out for chuds on the plane.
Thank you. And let's turn back now to the president's plans to travel to the Capitol
L
on January
plus fake
6th.
news plus ratio.
We know that White House counsel Pat Cipollone was concerned about the legal implications of such a trip, and he agreed
You are
with
fake
the Secret
news.
Service that it shouldn't happen. Ms. Hutchinson, did you have any conversations with Pat Cipollone about his concerns about the president going to the Capitol on January 6th?
On January 3rd, Mr. Cipollone had approached me, knowing that Mark had raised the prospect of going up to the
Fake
Capitol on
news.
January 6th. Mr. Cipollone and I had a brief private conversation where he said to me, we need to make sure that this doesn't happen. This would be legally a terrible idea for us. We have serious legal concerns if we go up to the Capitol that day. And he then urged me to continue relaying that to Mr. Meadows, because it's my understanding that Mr. Cipollone thought that Mr. Meadows was indeed pushing this along with the president.
And we understand, Ms. Hutchinson, that you also spoke to Mr. Cipollone on the morning of the 6th as you were about to go to the rally on the Ellipse. And Mr. Cipollone said something to you like, make sure the movement to the Capitol does not happen. Is that correct?
That's correct. I saw Mr. Cipollone right before I walked out onto West Exec that morning, and Mr. Cipollone said something to the effect of, please make sure we don't go up to the Capitol, Cassidy. Keep in touch with me. We're going to get charged with every crime imaginable if we make that movement happen.
And do you remember which crimes Mr. Cipollone was concerned with?
In the days leading up to the 6th, we had conversations about potentially obstructing justice or defrauding the electoral count.
Let's hear about some of those concerns that you mentioned earlier in one of your interviews with us.
Having a private conversation with Pat late in the afternoon of
Oh,
the
snap.
3rd or the
I know.
4th,
This is fucking wild, dude.
that Pat was concerned it would look like we were obstructing justice or obstructing the electoral college count. And I apologize for probably not being very confirm with my legal terms here, but that it would look like we were obstructing what was happening on Capitol Hill, and he was also worried that it would look like we were inciting a riot, encouraging a riot.
Yeah, it would look like that.
In fact, in the days before January 6th and on January 6th itself, President Trump expressed to multiple White House aides that he wanted to go to the Capitol after his speech. Here's what various White House aides have told the committee about the president's desire to go to the Capitol.
Did the president tell you this, that he wanted to speak at the Capitol?
Correct, yes.
During the meeting in the dining room, did the idea of the president proceeding or walking to the Capitol on the 6th after his speech come up?
Walking to the Capitol? No.
Driving to the Capitol?
It came up.
Okay, how did it come up and what was discussed?
He brought it up. He said, I want to go down to the Capitol.
What about him marching to the Capitol on the 6th?
Yes.
Tell us about that.
So, it's kind of a general thing. I mean, to get into the specifics of it, I was aware of the desire of the president to potentially march to the or accompany the
mob
rally attendees to the
rally attendees.
When did you first hear about this idea?
You mean
of
the angry
president
mob
accompanying rally attendees to the Capitol on the 6th?
Well, this was at the 6th. This was during the after he finished his remarks.
When the president said that he would be going to the Capitol during his speech on the ellipse, the Secret Service scrambled to find a way for him to go. We know this from witnesses and the Secret Service, also from messages among staff on the President's National Security Council. The NSC staff were monitoring the situation in real time, and you can see.
You mean her?
How the
She's like someone who worked for Trump,
in the
I
following
guess.
chat log that the committee has obtained.
Accuser of the brethren.
As you can see, NSC staff believed that Mogul, was, quote, going to the Capitol, and, quote, they are finding the best route now.
Wait,
From
they
these
call
chats,
him
we also know
Mogul?
the staff learned of the attack on the Capitol in real time.
Mogul?
When President Trump left the ellipse stage at 1:10, the staff knew that rioters had invaded the inaugural stage and Capitol Police were calling for all available officers to respond. When Republican leader Kevin McCarthy heard the president say he was going to the Capitol,
Not surprised,
he called you, Ms.
yeah.
Hutchinson. Isn't that right?
That's correct.
And in this text message, you told Tony Ornato, quote,
Surprise,
McCarthy
motherfucker.
just called me too. And do you guys think you're coming to my office? Tell us about the call that day with Leader McCarthy during the president's speech on the ellipse.
Young Mogul's been behind it all.
The stage, and when you're behind the stage,
That son
can't
of
really
a
hear
bitch.
what's going on in front of you.
What a stupid son
Mr.
of a bitch.
McCarthy called me with this information. I answered the call and he sounded rushed, but also frustrated and angry at me. And I was confused because I didn't know what the president had just said. He then explained, the president just said he's marching to the Capitol. You told me this whole week you aren't coming up here. Why would you lie to me? I said, I'm not lying. I wasn't
Whole
lying to you,
week?
sir.
I'm already weak.
We're not going to the
I'm
Capitol.
already-
And he said, well, he just said it on stage, Cassidy. Figure it out. Don't come up here. I said, I'll run the traps on this and I'll shoot you a text. I can assure you we're not coming up to the Capitol. We've already made that decision. He pressed a little bit more, believing me, but I think frustrated that the president had said that. And we ended the phone conversation after that. I called Mr. Ornato to reconfirm that we weren't going to the Capitol, and which is also in our text messages. I sent Mr. McCarthy another text telling him the affirmative that we were not going up to the Capitol, and he didn't respond after that.
And we understand, Ms. Hutchinson, that the plans for the president to come up to the Capitol had included discussions at some point about what the president would do when he came up to the Capitol on January 6th. Let's look at a clip of one of your interviews discussing that issue with the committee.
When you were talking about a scheduled movement, did anyone say what the president wanted to do when he got here?
No. Not that I can specifically remember. I remember hearing a few different ideas discussed between Mark and Scott Perry, Mark and Rudy Giuliani. I don't know which conversations were elevated to the president. I don't know what he personally wanted to do when he went up to the Capitol that day. I know that there were discussions about him having another speech outside of the Capitol before going in. I know that there was a conversation about him going into the House chamber at one point.
As we've all just heard, in the days leading up to January 6th, on the day of the speech, both before and during and after the rally speech, President Trump was pushing his staff to arrange for him to come up here to the Capitol during the electoral vote count. Let's turn now to what happened in the president's vehicle when the Secret Service told him he would not be going to the Capitol after his speech. First, here is the president's motorcade leaving the ellipse after his speech on January 6th.
Motorcade.
Ms. Hutchinson, when you returned to the White House in the motorcade after the president's speech, where did you go?
When I returned to the White House, I walked upstairs towards the Chief of Staff's office, and I noticed Mr. Ornato lingering outside of the office. Once we had made eye contact, he quickly waved me to go into his office, which was just across the hall from mine. When I went in, he shut the door, and I noticed Bobby Engel, who is the head of Mr. Trump's security detail, sitting in a chair, just looking somewhat discombobulated and
/fuck you, Karen. Hell yeah, let's go.
I looked at Tony, and he had said, "Did you effing hear what happened in the Beast?"
What up, baby?
I said, "No, Tony, I just got back. What happened?" Tony proceeded to tell me that
chicken picante ramen
when the
noodles
president
are
got
fucking
in the Beast,
bomb,
he
dude.
was under the impression
Hot and
from
soothing
Mr.
and
Meadows
spicy.
that the off-the-record movement to the Capitol was still possible and likely to happen, but that Bobby had more information. So once the president had gotten into the vehicle with Bobby, he thought that they were going up to the Capitol, and when Bobby had relayed to him, "We're not, we don't have the assets to do it, it's not secure, we're going back to the West Wing," the president had very strong, a very angry response to that.
Oh my God.
Tony described him as being irate.
Irate.
The president said something to the effect of, "I'm the effing president, take me up to the Capitol now."
Wow, dude.
To which Bobby responded, "Sir, we have to go back to the West Wing." The president reached up towards the front of the vehicle to grab at the steering wheel. Mr. Engel
He tried to grab the steering wheel.
Said, "Sir, you need to take your hand off the steering wheel. We're going back to the West Wing. We're not going to the Capitol."
This is wild.
Mr. Trump then used his free hand to lunge towards Bobby Engel. And when Mr. Ornato had recounted this story to me, he had motioned towards his clavicles.
I know, like a little fucking kid.
In the room as Mr. Ornato told you this story?
Dude, he is.
Did Mr. Engel correct or disagree with any part of the story from Mr. Ornato?
Mr. Engel did not correct or disagree with any part of the story.
Did Mr. Engel or Mr. Ornato ever after that tell you that what Mr. Ornato had just said was untrue?
Neither Mr. Ornato nor Mr. Engel told me ever that it was untrue.
And despite this altercation, this physical altercation, during the ride back to the White House, President Trump still demanded
This is going to be a great
Capitol.
movie. Oh my God.
Here's what Kayleigh McEnany, the White House press secretary at the time, wrote in her personal notes and told the committee about President Trump's desire to go to the Capitol after returning to the White House.
When you wrote POTUS wanted to walk to the Capitol, was that based solely on what the president said during his speech or anything that he or anybody else said afterwards?
So to the best of my recollection, I believe when we got back to the White House, he said he wanted to physically walk with the marchers, and according to my notes, he then said
I'm gonna walk.
He'd be fine with just riding the beast. But to the best of my recollection, he wanted to be a part of the march in some fashion.
Okay, and just for the record, the beast refers to
Testes.
the presidential limousine?
Yes.
President Trump did not go to the Capitol that day.
Wait, are you not shadow banned? Oh yeah, you're not shadow banned now. Okay. There you go, buddy.
So prior to leaving the rally site, when he got off the stage and everybody was making the movement back to the motorcade, I had overheard Mr. Meadows say to him then, as I had prior to Mr. Trump taking the stage that morning.
Whatever, wilder, hired, I know.
That he was still working on
stupid, dumb baby, bitch ass baby.
To the Capitol. So when Mr. Trump took the stage, he was under the impression via
Nikki,
Mr. Meadows that it was still possible. So when he got off the stage, I had relayed to Mr. Meadows that I had another conversation with Tony. The movement was still not possible. Mr. Meadows said, okay. And then as they proceeded to go to the motorcade.
Dude, thank you.
And Mr. Meadows had reiterated,
Bezos.
we're going to work on it, sir. Talk to Bobby. Bobby has more information. Mark got into his vehicle.
I don't know how to say your
to
name.
my understanding, Trump
It looks
got
like
into
Bezos.
the East. And
Apos.
after we had all arrived back at the White House later in the day,
Baze is fine. All right, cool. Thank you, Baze.
Via Mark, that
cheers, homie.
The president wasn't happy that Bobby didn't pull it off for him, and that Mark didn't work hard enough to get the movement on the books.
Dude,
The
this
physical
is...
altercation that Ms. Hutchinson described in the
I
presidential
Mark to
vehicle
the cabbage.
was not the first time that the president
Holy shit.
had become very angry
Kaya,
about
what
issues
up, homie?
relating to the election.
What up, baby?
On December 1, 2020, Attorney General Barr said in an interview that the Department of Justice had not
He's pulling his cock out!
of widespread election fraud sufficient to change the outcome of the
You know this
election.
jam?
Ms. Hutchinson, how did the president react to hearing that news?
Around the time that
can't see
I
it for some
understand
reason.
the AP article went live, I remember hearing noise coming from
Oh,
down the hall.
yeah,
as I poked my
okay,
head out
the
of
Hassan
office.
remix
I saw
thing.
the valet walking towards our office.
Whoa.
He had said, "Get the chief down to the dining room. The president wants him."
Let's think that
Mark
that
went
story
down
is
to the
real for a
dining
second,
room,
okay?
came back
Like
to the
your
office
kid's
a few
like, oh,
minutes
I would
later.
want to give the homeless people homes, and
After
you're like,
Mark had returned, I left the office and went down to the dining
you're
room.
a Republican now,
and I noticed that
bitch.
the door was propped open, and the valet was inside the dining room changing the tablecloth off of the dining room table. He motioned for me to come in and then pointed towards the front of the room near the fireplace mantle and the TV, where I first noticed there was ketchup dripping down the wall,
Amazing.
and there's a shattered porcelain plate on the floor. The valet had articulated that the president was extremely angry at the Attorney General's AP interview.
Come on, just guys go with
and
vaccine.
had thrown
Dark gang,
his
let's
lunch
go.
against the
Pew,
wall.
pew.
Which was causing them to have to clean up. So I
Not the
grabbed
ketchup.
a towel and started wiping the ketchup off of the wall to help the valet out.
Ketchup. He's Spanish ketchup
He
on
said
the
something to
wall.
the effect of, he's really ticked off about this. It's so clear of him for right now. He's really, really ticked off about
What a
this right
stupid
now.
son of a bitch.
And Ms. Hutchinson, was this the only instance that you are aware of where the president threw dishes?
It's not.
And are there other instances
Ketchup
in
on
the
the
dining
wall
room
like
that
a
you
little
recall where he
fucking
expressed his
baby,
anger?
dude. He's
There
well. Now we're
there were
finding out
several
what like
times throughout my tenure with the chief of staff
what a
that I was
little
aware
baby he is,
of
dude.
him
I mean,
either
we
throwing
knew that, but
dishes or flipping the tablecloth.
throw the dishes.
Let all the contents of the table go onto the floor and
Whoa.
let it break or go everywhere.
Oh my
And
God,
Ms.
dude,
Hutchinson,
this
Attorney
is so
General
wild.
Barr described to the committee the president's angry reaction when he finally met with President Trump. Let's listen.
And I said, look, know that you're dissatisfied with me, and I'm glad to offer my resignation. And he pounded the table very hard. Everyone sort of jumped, and he said, accept it.
Mr. Chairman, I reserve.
Gentlewoman reserves. The chair requests those in the hearing room to remain seated until the Capitol Police have escorted our witness from the room.
Come on,
Pursuant
man.
to the order
Give me a little
of
break
the
here.
committee of today, the chair declares the committee in recess for a period of approximately 10 minutes.
Dude, this is so fucking crazy. Like, this is wild shit.
We have been listening to the
Where does fucking fly come from? Get out of here.
Listening to the testimony of Cassidy Hutchinson, a former executive assistant
Cassidy
to
Hutchinson.
then White House Chief of Staff Mark Meadows, testimony that can only be described as explosive. Chuck Todd, I'm not sure where to start.
I am explosive, almost underplays what we just heard. I mean,
Explosive.
Before the description
West Coast
of the
shit.
former president's unhinged behavior, where he attacked his lead Secret Service detail.
Yeah,
which I'm
he's
still
attacking
trying to
his
digest,
Secret Service, dude.
Make it clear, I think, in a very compelling way that for days, everybody in and around the president knew that January 6th was going to be potentially explosive, knew it could become
this
violent.
is fucking hilarious.
The opening, I mean, every part of this testimony sort of had revelation after revelation, beginning with that opening anecdote about Rudy Giuliani essentially informing Ms. Hutchinson of what they at least thought the plan would be. But so, you know, as far as building the case about what the president knew and when he knew it and how illegal his acts were,
What a stupid
boy,
son
did
of
she
a bitch.
paint a damning picture. As I called her a human dot connector, and she connected a bunch of dots.
Human dot
But
connector.
then you throw in
Okay,
the sort of physical, unhinged behavior
Don't be rude.
of the former president with those two anecdotes. One, throwing a plate of food.
Throwing a plate,
in
yeah.
reaction to Bill Barr's interview with the Associated Press, where he publicly stated that there was no widespread election fraud. But then the incident with the Secret Service detail and that description, she's in the office of the Deputy Chief of Staff, Mr. Ornato, who himself was a former lead of the president. The lead Secret Service detail the president attacked is in the room as she's being told this story. So the point is, it really paints a very damning picture of the president. And you know, it's interesting, Lester, we go through this and nothing shocks when it comes to the former president.
Nothing
the idea that he tried to grab the wheel.
Yeah,
this
he
was
tried to grab the
clearly-
fucking
She
wheel
is painting a picture
of the
somebody who was
motorcade, dude.
very unhinged. I don't know what other word to use, but if that is based on her testimony, that is an unhinged actor.
You are fake news.
And Chuck, let's not forget, she also describes, well, actually, she doesn't describe, we actually hear the radio
Yo, this
transmission of
is something
police
else,
as they
dude,
spy
yeah.
people in the crowd at the ellipse with high-powered weapons.
This is fucking amazing.
As she tells it, the president gains knowledge
Yeah,
of what's happening there,
unhinged. He
wants
tried to
press
grab the
forward
fucking
to
wheel.
set aside the magnitude
No, we're going to the Capitol.
even after hearing reports of things like AR-15s.
Like, I assume that he was like, fuck these motherfuckers. I'm going back to the White House, you know, where it's safe. But he was actually so dumb he wanted to fucking go down there, too. Like
the former president. Maybe they don't defend his personal actions, but basically say, hey, this place was unprepared. We now have testimony that essentially that it's clear they knew this was going to happen, and clearly they withheld some of the most biggest concern that the Capitol Police should have known.
Homies had to hold him back. I know, dude.
What Rudy Giuliani said to Ms.
They're
Hutchinson.
like, Daddy, chill.
You know, had they known that information 4 days before, that puts
This is-
everything in a
oh my
different
God.
context for me. I know it does.
Oh,
And I assume
shit.
for a lot of
You know
people,
what? I gotta
because,
take my
again,
fucking meds.
this is not a security failure that everybody
Daddy, chill.
at the Capitol should have been prepared for. This was an intentional act by Trump and his cronies to essentially make sure that they could cause a ruckus at the Capitol. I mean, she's connecting that dot more than just with dots, with dashes there. It's a pretty straight line.
Let me bring in Peter Alexander. Peter, you and I both feverishly scribbling notes and remarking to each other, this is a 25-year-old young woman who is literally at the center of power, witness to these events and around these powerful people.
Well, it's stunning courage for anybody, but certainly for a 25-year-old. And you're struck by the fact that this 25-year-old, she wasn't a fly on the wall. She was literally an insider who was in those conversations where messages were being communicated to her from the White House counsel, the top lawyer for the White House, to the chief of staff on occasion. And what she did here that I think is so critical is that she gave voice to those individuals who have not come forward and testified on their own behalf. Most notably, President Donald Trump. We've been trying to see, and the key words to watch today were if she could say, I heard him say. And she says, I heard the president say, when they were standing behind the curtain, in effect, on the January 6th speech that he gave at the Ellipse. She said, I don't care that they have weapons. Take the mags away, the security magnetometers away. They aren't here to hurt me. They can march from here. Those are the words that she says she heard the president communicate even after it was shared with him that there were individuals carrying AR-15s, brass knuckles, other weapons that were just outside the gates of where he would be delivering that speech. She said about Pat Cipollone, the White House counsel, that he communicated to her his serious legal concerns about the president's desire to go up to Capitol Hill on that day. He said that they were going to get charged with every crime imaginable if they did that.
That is
the White House counsel telling her we cannot do this for all these reasons, to say nothing of the moments that were communicated to her in the room with the president's head of security, Mr. Engel, and also with Mr. Ornato, the head of operations, about that dramatic moment that played out inside the president's limousine, his SUV, when he put his hands on the wheel,
to everybody
put his hands on the neck
fucking,
of his top security individual, aide, as described, saying, send this thing up to the Capitol.
And just to be clear, when people think of the beast, the presidential limo, we think of that large, I don't know if it's a GM or a Cadillac or whatever. But
Billy, what do you make of this shit? I want to know. I really do want to know what Spilly thinks about all this, dude. Spilly, what's up?
Daddy, chill.
Oh, damn. Oh, damn. Oh, damn. Billy.
Daddy, chill.
God damn, Spilly had music. Spilly been pondering on this for a minute. God damn, Spilly, that was... Spilly, okay, well... I'm glad to know your stance.
Quiet, quiet.
Billy's fucking pissed. I know. Holy shit, dude! I have to keep turning on the fan, turning it off. Wait. Turn the fucking. Fuck, I turned off the air conditioner in my room. Like, dumb fuck. No wonder it's getting hot in here. Oh, what a dumb head. Spilly, chill. Yeah, it makes keys. Spilly is pissed. Whoops. Sorry, I turned the sound off.
Meant for this to be something that the focus was only on Cassidy Hutchinson, and certainly that was the case.
We don't want Spilly to have an
sometimes
aneurysm.
people might zone out, they might look away, they look at their phone.
Let Spilly
Instead,
rip
during
into...
this hearing, every single person in that room was glued to the screen. They were perked up and listening the entire time, almost as if they were afraid to miss the bombshell.
Spilly, chill.
And certainly bombshell after bombshell have happened in this
Bombshell.
hearing. The committee clearly not over-promising.
She's a
bombshell.
bombshell.
Surprise witness here in the room. I thought the whole thing was striking, and certainly as the chairman gavelled to a recess, we had at least one Democratic lawmaker stand and applaud for Hutchinson as she left the room. It sort of speaks to the feeling of gratitude among those who have been impacted by this day, that this young woman was—
He's pulling his cock out!
We know that there's security threats here. We know how hard, and you guys have all spoken to the fact that it must be so hard and so pressure-filled to be a young woman at the center of this right now. But certainly there was a feeling of gratitude in that room from so many of the people who were impacted by January 6th that she would be here and testify to so many of these striking moments that she's already spoken to. And look, it's clear they're not even done yet, Lester.
Yeah, there's more to come. Allie, we're in the 10-minute break we should point out right now. Allie, thank you very much. Let me go to our Washington correspondent, Yamiche Alcindor. You've been sampling some reaction from supporters of the former president. How are they characterizing what we're seeing?
King Didi. That's great.
Well, Lester,
I love that.
supporters of former President Trump and even aides who were helping try to contest the election on his behalf are shocked by what they just heard. I've been getting text messages in all caps saying, wow, the truth is coming out. He only cared about his own safety because, of course, as you remember, as they were describing, and as Cassidy Hutchinson was describing the fact that the president not only lunged at the neck of a Secret Service agent, but also lunged at the steering wheel of that vehicle that he was in.
Brave
he was
young
saying,
woman
I'm not at risk,
shit,
they're not gonna hurt
yeah.
me, even though they had AR-15s and military backpacks and all sorts of other
Yeah, to
equipment
avoid
that was making the
prison,
Secret Service
exactly,
very,
dude.
very
I knew
nervous.
they'd be
We should
fucking
also
doing
point out
this.
that violence had already broken out at the Capitol. While all of this is happening, that is going on. And when I'm talking to the people that were closest to President Trump, some aides again, who were on his campaign, they say that it really hurts to think about the fact that here was the President of the United States only thinking about his own safety.
Anonymously, what up, cutie?
The committee really did set the stakes really, really high.
Yeah,
and based
yeah,
on the reactions
baby,
that
I
I'm getting from
guarantee
people,
it.
a lot of them Trump supporters, they really are meeting the bar here for a history-making session. All eyes were on this young woman. She, of course, is part of the Republican establishment. Even though she's young, she worked for Steve Scalise. She was in the legislative affairs. So many people know who she is, know that she really did have a lot of values that were really connected to the Republican Party. So to see her really sit here and look sad in some ways, look really petrified in other ways, but also look stoic when she is
You're
sitting here
camping?
quoting directly what she heard from the president.
Oh no,
or what
it's
she heard people say the
raining.
president did. I also think it's really important that there was that scene at the end where President Trump is throwing plates, where he's throwing his lunch against the wall. It
I
is
hope it's going good other than
instance where
that,
he
though.
is again having to confront the fact that his election lies are just
What up,
that, they're
baby?
lies. There was no fraudulent in the 2020 election, and here was his Attorney General, Bill Barr, trying to explain that to him. And there are a lot of people in Trump world who say this is another sort of key part here where people feeling like they were useful idiots because they really do feel like former President Trump
Useful
was only
idiots.
worried about himself, drunk off of power, wanting to
Obviously, he's
stay
only
on,
worried about himself. That's what he's always been.
physically attacking a Secret Service agent, which I think,
What up,
Lester,
baby?
is still so remarkable, and it's going to take a lot of time for people to process just how far former President Trump was willing to go.
And Yamiche, I'm going to ask you a question. It may not matter as much as it did an hour ago, but based on what we've seen, these stories would have been as shocking 2 weeks from now, 3 weeks from now, 4 weeks from now. Are we closer to getting the
Yo, all those ass licking
why
talk.
they wanted this out now so often?
It's a
Oh,
great
shit,
question.
Spilly!
In talking to folks, it feels, at least in talking
Flush
to
the
folks,
weed.
I get the sense that Cassidy Hutchinson, that her security and her sort of how she felt about this information being out in the ether.
I mean, the
and what it's
perfectly
like
legal
like that,
tobacco.
She spoke it out with her name, with her face out there publicly, that the lawmakers wanted to make sure that she had this
Spilly, don't
this
just sit
opportunity,
there.
and then that she could finally maybe go to some safe location.
control my
Of course, that
horny
is
level.
all at this point not clear. It's
Yeah.
unclear whether or not that's exactly what the lawmakers were thinking, but my sense in talking to sources are
Me
that they were really,
too.
really concerned
I'm
about
dying,
her
I
safety.
know.
And they also felt like this was urgent information. Let's remember that this is a committee that is on a timetable, right?
Now
There
me and
is
Spilly got
sort of
the
midterm
FBI at the
elections all
fucking
way in
door.
the fall, in November, and lawmakers
I
want
was
as
just
much time
kidding.
as possible for the public to really digest what are, as you described them, explosive details on the actions of former President Trump.
All right, the witness walking back in along with members of the committee. Let me get Chuck Todd in here very quickly. Chuck, a lot of this has been about, are we going to hear the magic words of what the president knew, his acknowledgement of doing wrong? Are they close or hasn't happened yet?
I think they're closer, and as I had one very close Trump supporter say to me,
No, Spilly.
she's testified to, it cuts across the public defense I've been making of him, which is that it was just a speech.
it's no longer just a speech now on that ellipse.
All right, Chuck Todd, we are waiting now for this session to resume. We don't know where they're going to take it right now.
Billy,
but of course,
what the hell are you doing over there?
So far has will fill conversations for many hours. There's the gavel. Let's go back.
Will be in order. Chair recognizes the
All right.
Vice Chair Cheney.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Before we turn to what Ms. Hutchinson saw and heard in the White House during the violent attack on the Capitol on January 6th,
Bushcraft game,
let's discuss
Minecraft
certain
in the dust.
communications White House Chief of Staff
Drop out of school
Mark
to go buy
Meadows
like
had
that
on
shit.
January 5th. President Trump's associate, Roger Stone, attended rallies during the afternoon and the evening of
Video
January
game
5th
addict
in
recovery.
Washington,
Yeah,
D.C.
me too. Dude, I've been just thinking about playing Metroid this entire fucking trial. I'm like, dude, I just want to play Metroid.
Multiple members of the Oath Keepers who were allegedly serving as his security detail. As we now know, multiple members of that organization have been charged with or pled guilty to crimes associated with January 6th. Mr. Stone has invoked his Fifth Amendment privilege against self-incrimination before this committee. General Michael Flynn has also taken the Fifth before this committee. Mr. Stone previously had been convicted of other federal crimes unrelated to January 6th. General Flynn had pleaded guilty to a felony charge also predating
Now is not the time, Spilly.
President Trump pardoned General Flynn just weeks after the presidential election. And in July of 2020, he commuted the sentence Roger Stone was to serve. The night before January 6th, President Trump instructed his Chief of Staff, Mark Meadows, to contact both Roger Stone and Michael Flynn regarding what would play out the next day. Ms. Hutchinson, is it your understanding that President Trump asked Mark Meadows to speak with Roger Stone and General Flynn on January 5th?
That's correct. That is my understanding.
And Ms. Hutchinson, is it your understanding that Mr. Meadows called Mr. Stone on the 5th?
I'm under the impression that Mr. Meadows did complete both a call to
Tried to tell me I do not
Mr.
have
Stone and General
ADHD.
Flynn
What?
the evening of
I have
the
a
5th.
video game? Oh my god.
And do you know what they talked about that evening?
What the
Ms. Hutchinson?
fuck kind of
I'm not sure.
psychiatric nurse is that,
Is it your
dude?
understanding that Mr. Giuliani, Mr. Eastman, and others had set up
Holy
what has
shit.
been called, quote, a war room at the Willard Hotel on
A
the night
war
of the 5th?
room?
I was aware of that the night of the 5th.
And do you know if Mr. Meadows ever intended to go to the Willard Hotel on the night of the 5th?
Mr. Meadows had a conversation with me where he wanted me to work with
Lord
Secret
of
Service
mercy.
on a movement
After
from the White
talking
House
to
the
me
Willard
for
Hotel so
5
he could attend
minutes.
the meeting or meetings with Mr. Giuliani and his associates in the war room.
The
And
war room?
what was your view as to whether or not Mr. Meadows should go to the Willard that night?
I had made it clear to Mr. Meadows that I didn't believe it was a smart idea for him to go to the Willard Hotel that night. I wasn't sure everything that was going on at the Willard Hotel, although I knew enough about what Mr. Giuliani and his associates were pushing during this period. I didn't think that it was something appropriate for the White House Chief of Staff to attend or to consider involvement in. I made that clear to Mr.
That
Meadows.
reported to me sucked. Yeah,
Throughout
what the
afternoon, he mentioned a
fuck?
few more times going up to the Willard Hotel that evening, and then eventually dropped the subject the
That
night
is-
of the 5th and said that he would dial in instead.
So
Sounds
General
pretty
Flynn
shitty.
has appeared before this committee, and when he appeared before our committee, he took the 5th.
Based.
Let's briefly view a clip of General Mike Flynn.
The only
taking the
smart
Fifth
one on the team, yeah.
General Flynn, do you
Only
believe
adult in the room
violence
as
on
well,
January
yeah.
6th was justified?
Not a surprise.
Do we have
Sounds about
Yes.
correct. Yeah, that's crazy. Me, motherfucker. Almost sounds as bad as the Christian psychiatrist I went to as a kid, man. That motherfucker. Oh my god. Don't even get me started on that shit.
I'm asking Both.
Let me just say, they suck.
Do you believe the violence on January 6th was justified morally?
Christianity and psychiatry do not mix.
Legally? General Flynn, do you believe in the peaceful transition of power in the United States of
You're good,
America?
Paige. What the fuck?
Let's move on now to January 6th.
What are they
and the
doing?
conduct of
Are they
Donald
swearing
Trump
to God
and Mark
again or
Meadows
something?
During the attack on the Capitol. Ms. Hutchinson, I'd like now for us to listen to a description, your description of what transpired in the West Wing during the attack. For context, in this clip, you describe the time frame starting at about 2 p.m.
So I remember Mark being alone in his office for quite some time, and I know we've spoken about Ben Williamson going in at one point, and I don't personally remember Ben going in. I don't doubt that he had gone in, but I remember him being alone in his office for most of the afternoon, around 2 o'clock to 2:05.
Me here for it, BB.
Around 2 o'clock to 2:05, we were watching the TV.
Smite me, Sky Daddy.
Were getting closer and closer to the Capitol. Mark still hadn't popped out of his office or said anything about it. So that's when I went into his office. I saw that he was sitting on his couch, on his cell phone.
Sky Daddy.
Dominating. Same as the morning where he was just kind of scrolling and typing. I said, "Hey, are you watching the TV, Chief?" Because his TV was small. You can see it, but I didn't know if he was really paying attention. I said, "You watching the TV, Chief?" He was like, "Yeah." The rioters are getting really close. Have you talked to the president? He said, "No, he wants to be alone right now." Still looking at his phone.
He wants to be alone right now.
So I started to get frustrated because I sort of felt like I was watching this is not a great comparison, but a bad car accident that was about to happen where you can't stop it, but
Sky Daddy.
And I remember thinking in that moment, Mark needs to snap out of this, and I don't know how to snap him out of this, but he needs to care. And I just remember I blurted out, I said, "Mark, do you know where Jim's at right now?" And he looked up at me at that point and said, "Jim?" And I said, "Marcus, he was
Zeno!
on the phone a while ago giving a 4 speech. Did you listen?"
What up, cutie?
He said, "Yeah, it was real good. Did you like it?" And I said, "Yeah." "Do you know where he's at right now?" He said, "No, I haven't heard from him." And I said, "You might want to check in with him, Mark." And I remember pointing at the TV and I said, "The rioters are getting close. They might get in." And he looked at me and said something to the effect of, "All right, I'll give him a call."
Not long after the rioters broke into the Capitol, you described what happened with White House counsel Pat Cipollone.
No more than
a
minute and a half later, I see Pat Cipollone barreling down the hallway towards our office.
He was barreling.
Rushed right in, looked at me.
Barreling.
Said, "Is Mark in his office?" And I said, "Yes." He just looked at me and started shaking his head and went over, opened Mark's office door, stood there with the door propped open, said something to Mark's still sitting on his phone. I remember glancing and he's still sitting on his phone. And I remember Pat saying to him,
"What up, baby?"
Something to the effect of, "The rioters have gotten to the Capitol, Mark. We need to go down and see the president now." And Mark looked up at him and said, "He doesn't want to do anything, Pat." And Pat said something to the effect of, and very clearly had said this to Mark, something to the effect of, "Mark, something needs to be done or people are going to die and the blood's going to be on your effing hands. This is getting out of control. I'm going down there." And at that point, Mark stood up from his couch, both of his phones in his hand. He had his glasses on still.
Both his phones.
He walked out with Pat. He put both of his phones on my desk and said, "Let me know if Jim calls." And they walked out and went down to the dining room.
A few minutes later, Representative Jordan called back.
Okay.
A couple minutes later, so likely around between 2:15
I like how she narrates the story. Yeah.
2:25. I know the tweet went out at 2:24. I don't remember if I was there when the tweet went out or if it happened right afterwards, but Jim had called. I answered the phone. Said
Mark
1
Meadows.
second.
Yeah.
I guess he knew it was me. I introduced myself, but I don't remember if he called my cell phone or if he had called one of Mark's. But I answered the phone and said, 1 sec, Mark's on the hall, I'm gonna go hand the phone to him. He said, okay. So I went down, I asked the valet if Mark was in the dining room. The valet said yes. I opened the door to the dining room, briefly stepped in to get Mark's attention, showed him the phone, like flipped the phone his way so he could see it said Jim Jordan. He had stepped to where I was standing there holding the door open, took the phone talking to Jim with the door still propped open. So I took a few steps back. So I probably was 2 feet from Mark. He was standing in the doorway going into the Oval Office dining room. They had a brief conversation, and in the crossfires, I heard briefly like what they were talking about, but in the background I had heard conversations in the Oval dining room at that point talking about the hang Mike Pence chants.
That clip ended, Ms. Hutchinson, with you recalling that you heard the president, Mr. Meadows, and the White House counsel discussing the hang Mike Pence chants. And then you described for us what happened next.
It wasn't until Mark hung up the phone, handed it back to me. I went back to my desk. A couple minutes later, him and Pat came back, possibly Eric Kirschman too. I'm pretty sure Eric Kirschman was there. But I'm confident it was Pat that was there. I remember Pat saying something to the effect of, Mark, we need to do something more. They're literally calling for the vice president to be effing hung. And Mark had responded something to the effect of, you heard him, Pat. He thinks Mike deserves it. He doesn't think they're doing anything wrong. To which Pat said something, this is effing crazy. We need to be doing something more. Briefly stepped into Mark's office. And when Mark had said something to the effect of, he doesn't think they're doing anything wrong, knowing what I had heard briefly in the dining room, coupled with Pat discussing the hang Mike Pence chants in the lobby of our office, and then Mark's response, I understood there to be the rioters in the Capitol that were chanting for the vice president to be hung.
Let me pause here on this point. The rioters chanted hang Mike Pence.
This is a wild story. I like hearing.
Donald Trump. Said that, quote,
this has been the most interesting day of the January 6th hearings. Like, I like hearing her side of the story. It's very interesting.
Expressed at other times as well.
Like being on the inside of everything.
ABC News correspondent Jonathan Karl. President Trump was asked about the supporters chanting hang Mike Pence last year. Instead of condemning them, the former president defended them.
Said hang Mike
Because it's common sense, John.
Here it
it's
goes.
common sense.
Common sense.
You're supposed to protect. How can you, if you know a vote is fraudulent?
It's not fraudulent.
How can you pass on a fraudulent vote to Congress?
Don't be rude.
President Trump's view that the rioters were not doing anything wrong and that, quote, Mike deserved it, helps us to understand why the president
These are great people.
did not ask
You're very
the rioters
special.
to leave the Capitol for multiple
I already told
hours.
them they were special.
In fact, he put this tweet out at 2:24 p.m. Ms. Hutchinson, do you recall seeing
Pence
this
didn't
tweet
have the
in which the
courage.
president said the vice
Oh,
president did not
damn.
have the courage to do what needed to be done?
I do.
Ms. Hutchinson, what was your reaction when you saw this tweet?
I don't think I heard that
As a
clip. Yeah, it's
staffer,
common sense.
that
Yeah, he
works.
straight up said
To always represent
he
the
deserves it,
administration
basically.
to the best of my ability, and to showcase the good things that he had done for the country. I remember feeling frustrated, disappointed, And really, it felt personal. It was really sad.
Yeah, this is wild,
American,
hearing her side of
I
it.
was disgusted. It was
Don't be rude.
unpatriotic. It was un-American. We were watching the Capitol building get defaced over a lie. And it was something that was really hard in that moment to digest.
Seems like she
knowing
is
what
the
I've
only
been
sane
hearing
one out of
down the
this
hall
entire group
in the
of
conversations that were happening, seeing that tweet come up
sycophants.
and knowing what was happening on the Hill.
Trump sycophant,
And
Trump
it's something
simps.
that I still struggled to work through the emotions of that.
Ms. Hutchinson, we have also spoken to multiple other White House staff.
She's
about
so
their
out of the
reaction to
cult
Donald
now,
Trump's
dude.
224 tweet, condemning Mike Pence for not having the courage to refuse to count electoral votes, an act that would have been illegal. Matthew Pottinger, a former Marine
Who is this?
intelligence
Yeah,
officer, who served
White
in the
House
White
aide.
House for 4 years, including as
Under
Deputy
Trump.
National Security Advisor, was in the vicinity of the Oval Office at various points throughout the day. When he saw that tweet,
mozzarella
he
ball.
immediately decided to resign his position.
Cutie.
Let's watch him describe his reaction to the president's tweet.
One of my staff brought me a printout of a tweet by the president. And the tweet said something to the effect that Mike Pence, the vice president, didn't have the courage to do what should have been done. I read that tweet and made a decision at that moment to resign. That's where I knew that I was leaving that day once I read that tweet.
Oh, God.
Ultimately, members of the White House staff, Sarah Matthews, cabinet members Secretary Chao and Secretary DeVos resigned as well. Here is Secretary DeVos's resignation letter. As you can see, in resigning on January 6th, Secretary DeVos said to the president, quote, "There's no mistaking the impact your rhetoric had on the situation, and it is the inflection point for me." Let's also look at Secretary Chao's resignation statement. When Secretary Chao resigned, she spoke of the January 6th attack, and she said, quote, "As I am sure is the case with many of you,
Ciao.
this has deeply troubled me in a way I simply cannot set aside." Ms. Hutchinson, in our prior interviews, we've asked you about what the president's advisors were urging him to do during the attack. You've described roughly 3 different camps of thought inside the White House that day. Can you tell us about those?
There was a group of individuals that were strongly urging him
set
to
for
take
life?
immediate
Oh,
and swift
for
action.
sure.
I would classify the White House
I'm
counsel's
the-
office,
yeah.
Mr. Hirschman, Miss Ivanka Trump.
Oh, absolutely.
category
Yeah,
of-
she's 100%.
Really working.
Like we said earlier, too, all the
get him to
libs
take
are gonna be
action,
like,
pleading with him to take action. There was
you
a more
know,
neutral group
licking her ass and shit now.
where advisors were trying to toe the line, knowing that Mr. Trump didn't necessarily want to take immediate action and condemn the riots, but knowing something needed to be done. And then there was the last group, which was deflect and blame. Let's blame Antifa. These aren't our
Blame
people.
Antifa, of course. So that's where it
It's
came
my
from.
understanding that Mr. Meadows was
Blame
in
Antifa.
the deflect and blame category, but he did end up taking a more neutral route, knowing that
Try
there
to
were
blame
several
us and
advisors in the president's circle urging him to take more action, which I think was reflected in the rhetoric released later that day in the videos.
You told us that the White House counsel's office was in the camp encouraging the president to tell the rioters to stop the attack and to leave the Capitol. Let's listen.
White House counsel's office wanted there to be a strong statement out to condemn the rioters. I'm confident in that.
Now let's look at just one example of what some senior advisors to the president were urging. Ms. Hutchinson, could you look at the exhibit that we're showing on the screen now? Have you seen this note before?
That's a note that I wrote at the direction of the Chief of Staff on January 6th, likely around 3 o'clock.
And it's written on a Chief of Staff note card, but that's your handwriting, Ms. Hutchinson?
That's my handwriting.
And why did you write this note?
The Chief of Staff was in a meeting with Eric Hirschman and potentially Mr. Philbin, and they had rushed out of the office fairly quickly. Mark had handed me the note card with one of his pens and started dictating a statement for the president to potentially put out.
And, no, I'm sorry, go ahead.
That's okay. There were two phrases on there, one illegal and then one without proper authority. The illegal phrase was the one that Mr. Meadows had dictated to me. Mr. Hirschman had chimed in and said, also put without legal authority. There should have been a slash between the two phrases. It was an or if the president had opted to put one of those statements out. Evidently he didn't. Later that afternoon, Mark came back from the Oval Dining Room and put the palm card on my desk with illegally crossed out, but said we didn't need to take further action on that statement.
So, to your knowledge, this statement was never issued?
It was, to my knowledge, it was never issued.
And Ms. Hutchinson, did you understand that Ivanka Trump wanted her father to send people home?
That's my understanding, yes.
Let's play a clip of you addressing that issue.
I remember her saying at various points, no, she wants him, she wanted her dad to send them home. She wanted her dad to tell them to go home peacefully, and she wanted to include language that he necessarily wasn't on board with at the time.
You will hear more about this at our later hearings, but we have evidence of many others imploring Donald Trump and Mark Meadows to take action. Here is some of that evidence, text messages sent to Mark Meadows during the attack. This is a text message at 2:32 from Laura Ingram. Hey Mark, the president needs to tell people in the Capitol to go home. And the next message, this is hurting all of us. And then he's destroying his legacy and playing into every stereotype. We lose all credibility against the BLM Antifa crowd if things go south. The president's son, Don Jr., also urgently contacted Mark Meadows. At 2:53, he wrote, he's got to condemn this shit ASAP. The Capitol Police tweet is not enough. As you will see, these are just two of the numerous examples of Trump supporters and allies urging the president to tell his supporters to leave
More
the
than
Capitol.
his allies, his fucking son.
Would not have been hard for the president to
Yo,
simply
this
walk
is
down
nuts,
to the
right?
briefing room a few feet down the hall from the Oval
Damn,
Office.
yeah.
As Nora O'Donnell noted during an interview
This is
with House
hilarious.
Republican leader Kevin McCarthy, where Leader McCarthy said he believed the attack was un-American.
Yeah, they didn't have any credibility to
I want
do
to quickly bring
it.
in Kevin
Hey,
McCarthy,
fucking
the
got
House
him.
Minority Leader. Leader McCarthy, do you condemn this
They
violence?
can't even spell words,
I
yeah.
completely condemn the violence in the Capitol. What we're currently watching unfold is un-American. I'm disappointed. I'm sad. This is not what our country should look like.
Yeah, you
This is
guys
not who we
fucking
are.
did this,
This is not
dude.
the First Amendment. This has to stop, and this has to stop now.
Leader
Yeah,
McCarthy,
you're the
President
ones
of
who
the United
did this,
States has a briefing
asshole.
room steps from the Oval Office. It
This
is-
this
the
thing
cameras
that we
are
started
on
has to stop
24/7,
now.
As you know. Why hasn't he walked down and said that now?
I conveyed to the president what I think is best to do, and I'm hopeful the president will do it.
Republican House member Mike Gallagher also implored the president to call off the attack.
Mr. President, you have got to stop this. You are the only person who can call this off. Call it off.
Who the fuck's this guy?
The election is over. Call it off.
The election
This
is
is bigger
over.
than you. It's bigger than any member of Congress. It is about the United States of America.
Who the fuck
which
are
is
you?
more important than any politician. Call it off.
Petri dish. Yeah.
It's over.
Despite the fact that many people close to Donald Trump were urging him to send people home, he did not do so until later.
Dude,
Much
Spilly's
later,
dad was an alien and his
4:17
mom was a
p.m., Donald
petri
Trump finally
dish.
told the rioters to go home and that he
We
loved
found
them.
out recently.
Here's a portion of the video President Trump recorded from the White House.
We have to have peace. So go home. We love you.
You're very special.
You're very special. You've seen what happens. You see the way others are treated that are so bad and so evil. I know how you feel. But go home and go home in
Fuck are you
peace.
talking about?
But as
You're
we will
very
show
special.
in even greater detail in future hearings, Donald Trump was reluctant to put this message out, and he still could not bring himself to condemn the attack. Ms. Hutchinson has told us that too.
The one that he put out at 4:17.
I'm sure you've discussed it, and just to elaborate if I hadn't already at that point, I recall him being reluctant to film the video on the 6th. I was not involved in any of the logistics or the planning for that video. I just remember seeing the video go out and feeling a little shocked after it went out.
On the evening of January 6th and the day after, the president's family and his senior staff and others tried to encourage the president to condemn the violence and commit to the peaceful transition of power. At 3:31 p.m. on January 6th, Sean Hannity of Fox News texted Mark Meadows.
Hannity.
Mr. Hannity said, quote, "Can he make a statement? I saw the tweet. Ask people to leave the Capitol." Later that evening, Mr. Hannity sent another text message to Mark Meadows. This time, he shared a link to a tweet. That tweet reported that President Trump's cabinet secretaries were considering invoking the 25th Amendment to remove President Trump from office. As you can see on the screen, the 25th Amendment to the Constitution creates a process for the transition of power.
Why
The president
didn't
is
they just
unfit
do that?
Or unable to serve. 25th Amendment has never been used to remove a president.
Yeah, well.
But the committee has learned that after the attack on the U.S. Capitol, this was being discussed by members of President Trump's cabinet as a way of
And we
stripping the
don't,
full
I
power
know,
of
what
the
the-
presidency from Donald Trump. President Trump's
Willy
supporters were
Wonka.
worried. In addition to the tweet
What up,
that he
Bobby?
sent Mark Meadows after the attack, Sean Hannity apparently
fucking
spoke
hilarious.
with President Trump and warned him about what could happen. We understand that this text message that Sean Hannity sent to Kayleigh McEnany on January 7th
I'm
shows
sure
what
they
Mr.
used
Hannity
to.
said to the president.
Yeah,
First,
Hannity and Trump
no
used to
more
talk every
stolen
night.
election talk. Second, impeachment and 25th Amendment are real. Many people will quit. Ms. Hutchinson, you told us that you were
Many
hearing
people will quit.
about discussions related to the 25th Amendment. Here's part of what you said.
Intrigued by the pardon deal?
Mr. Pompeo reached out to have the conversation with Mr. Meadows in case he hadn't heard the discussions amongst cabinet secretaries. And from what I understand, it was more of a, this is what I'm hearing, I want you to be aware of it, but I also think it's worth putting on your radar because you are the chief of staff. You're technically the boss of all the cabinet secretaries. And
Yeah, that's some shady ass shit.
conversations progress, you should be ready to take action on this. Like, I'm concerned for you and your positioning with this. You know,
They
reach out to me
should
if you
have,
questions
I
or,
know.
Like, I could be helpful with you at all.
Like,
Inside the White House, the president's
yeah,
advisors,
they text each
including
other.
members of
Trump
his family,
and
wanted
Hannity
him
used
to
to talk
deliver a
every
speech to the
night.
country.
It was like a known
Deputy
thing.
White House counsel Pat Philbin prepared the first draft of what would be the president's remarks
Yeah,
on
Trump would
national
talk to
healing,
Hannity like every
delivered
single
via
night
pre-taped
on the
video
phone
on
privately.
January 7th. When he arrived at the White House on the 7th, Mr. Philbin believed that more needed to be said. So he
Yup.
sat down and started writing. He shared the draft with Pat Cipollone, who also believed the president
Pat
needed to say more.
Spilleroni.
Mr. Cipollone agreed with the content, as did Eric Hirschman, who reviewed the draft. The committee has learned that the president did not agree with the substance as drafted and resisted giving a speech at all. Ms. Hutchinson, do
I'm
you
learning
recall
your
discussions about the president's speech on January 7th?
I do.
Let's listen, Ms. Hutchinson, to what you told us about that and about the process of crafting those remarks.
I learned from a conversation with Mark and overhearing between him and White House counsel and Eric Hirschman as well that Trump didn't necessarily think he needed to do anything more on the 7th than what he had already done on the 6th. When he was convinced to put out a video on the 7th, I understand that he had a lot of opinions about what the context of that announcement were to entail. I had original drafts of the speech where there were several lines that didn't make it in there about prosecuting the rioters or calling them violent. He didn't want that in there. He wanted
government directed the media is one of the signs of fascism. Yep, true that.
And this is just with the increased emphasis of
it is
his
fucking
mindset
crazy.
At the time,
Like they had a bromance.
He didn't think that they did anything wrong.
Bro.
The people who did something wrong that day.
Fucking
or the person who did something wrong
bromance.
that day was Mike Pence by not standing with him.
But the president's advisors urged him to give the speech.
Who convinced him to do the video on the 7th?
I'm not sure who convinced him or if it was a group of people that convinced him.
Who was in the group that you're aware of?
That I'm aware of. Mark, Ivanka,
In that
Jared
instance,
Kushner,
it was more the media directing
Eric
the
Hirschman,
government. That's
Pat
true.
Cipollone, Pat Philbin.
Trump didn't know what the fuck he was doing, dude.
Those are people that I'm aware of.
Do you know why that group of people thought it was necessary for him to release a statement?
Motherfucker was trying to grab the wheel of the...
From what I understood at the time,
Oh,
and from
dude.
what the reports were coming in,
This shit has been funny as fuck.
there's a large concern of the 25th Amendment potentially being invoked, and there were concerns about what would happen in the Senate if the 25th was invoked. So the primary reason that I had heard, other than, we did not do enough on the 6th, we need to get a stronger message out there and condemn this, otherwise this will be your legacy. The secondary reason to that was, think about what might happen in the final 15 days of your presidency if we don't do this. There's already talks about
Yo, Willy Bonka! Holy shit!
The president ultimately delivered the
Thank
remarks.
you for gifting
Unlike
one
many
to
of his other
Jasmine,
speeches, he did not
homie.
ad-lib much. He recited them
Jasmine
without
Shanae,
significant
baby.
alteration, except one.
Dark
Even
gang,
then,
fucking Willy
on
Bonka, I
January
love you,
7th,
homie.
2021, the day after the attack
It's
on the
also
US Capitol,
terrifying, I know.
the president still could not bring himself to say, quote, but this election is
How
now
close we came,
over.
yeah, for real.
One other point about the speech,
Love
Ms.
you,
Hutchinson.
homie.
Did you hear that Mr. Trump at one point wanted to
Cute
add
gang.
language about pardoning those who took
Hell
part in the
yeah,
January
cute
6th
gang,
riot?
dark gang. That's my favorite emo.
I did hear
Cute
that,
gang.
and I understand that Mr. Meadows was encouraging that
gang,
language as
dark
well.
gang.
Thank you, and here's what you told us previously about that.
You said he was instructed not to include it. Who was instructing him not to include language about the pardon in that January 7th?
I understood from White House counsel's office coming into our office that morning that they didn't think that it was a good idea to include that in the speech.
That being Pat Cipollone.
That's correct. And Eric Hirschman.
Ms. Hutchinson, did Rudy Giuliani ever suggest that he was interested in receiving a presidential pardon related to January 6th?
He did.
Ms. Hutchinson, did White House Chief of Staff Mark Meadows ever indicate that he was interested in receiving a presidential pardon related to January 6th?
Mr. Meadows did seek that pardon. Yes, ma'am.
Ha!
Thank you, Ms. Hutchinson. Mr. Chairman, I yield back.
Seeking the pardon. Like, man, we did some
I
illegal
want to
shit.
thank our witness for joining us today.
Let me get a fucking pardon,
The
homie.
members of the Select Committee may have additional questions for today's witness, and we ask that you respond expeditiously in writing to those questions. Without objections, members will be permitted 10 business days to submit statements for the record, including opening remarks and additional questions for the witness. Without objection, the chair recognizes the vice chair for a closing statement.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. I want to begin by thanking Ms. Hutchinson for her testimony today. We are all in her debt. Our nation is preserved by those who abide by their oaths to our Constitution. Our nation is preserved by those who know the fundamental difference between right and wrong. And I want all Americans to know that what Ms. Hutchinson has done today is not easy. The easy course is to hide from the spotlight, to refuse to come forward, to attempt to downplay or deny what happened. That brings me to a different topic. While our committee has seen many witnesses, including many Republicans, testify fully and forthrightly, this has not been true of every witness. And we have received evidence of one particular practice that raises significant concern. Our committee commonly asks witnesses connected to Mr. Trump's administration or campaign whether they've been contacted by any of their former colleagues or anyone else who attempted to influence or impact their testimony. Without identifying any of the individuals involved, let me show you a couple of samples of answers we received to this question. First, here's how one witness described phone calls from people interested in that witness's testimony. Quote, "What they said to me is as long as I continue to be a team player, they know I'm on the right team. I'm doing the right thing. I'm protecting who I need to protect. You know I'll continue to stay in good graces in Trump world."
In Trump world.
And they have reminded me a couple of times that Trump does read transcripts. And just keep that in mind as I proceed through my interviews with the committee.
What?
Here's another sample in a different context. This is a call received by one of our witnesses. Quote, "A person let me know you have your deposition tomorrow. He wants me to let you know he's thinking about you.
Oh,
he knows
shit.
you're loyal, and you're going to do the right thing when you go in for your deposition."
Damn.
I
Witness
think most
intimidation.
Americans know that attempting to influence witnesses to testify untruthfully
is a
presents
witness intimidation.
very serious concerns.
Yeah.
We will be discussing these issues
Fucking
as a
illegal,
committee,
right?
carefully considering our next steps. Mr. Chairman, thank you. I yield back.
Wait, was she the
Gentleman
one being
yields back.
threatened?
Ms. Hutchinson, thank you. Thank you for doing your patriotic duty and helping the American people get a complete understanding of January 6th and its causes. Thank you for your courage in testifying here today. You have the gratitude of this committee and your country. I know it wasn't easy to sit here today and answer these questions.
Mob tactics, I know.
But after hearing your testimony in all its candor and detail,
yeah,
I want to speak directly
this
to the
was the
handful of
best
witnesses
one so far.
who
Like,
have been
this was
outliers
wild.
in our investigation. The small number who have defied
They didn't
us
disclose.
outright.
Yeah, we can guess who the
Those
fuck they're
whose
from, though.
memories
Like,
have failed them again and again.
more like one of
on the
Trump's
most
little
important
crony
details.
motherfuckers, you know?
And to those who fear Donald Trump and his enablers, because of this courageous woman and others like her, you attempt to hide the truth from the American people.
I mean, it is
who face
scary that the mob would
And
be
to that
after
group
you
of
for this
witnesses,
shit. Like,
if you've heard this testimony today and suddenly you remember things you couldn't previously recall, or there are some
I do not
details
recall.
you'd like to clarify, or you discovered some courage you had hidden away somewhere, our doors remain open. The Select Committee will reconvene in the weeks ahead as we continue to lay
when's
out
the
our
next one?
findings
This
to the
was
American
fun.
people.
I'm glad I stayed
The
up to
chair
fucking
requests those
do
in the
this.
hearing room to remain seated until the Capitol Police have escorted the witness and members from the room. Without objection, the
I
committee
didn't
stands
play
adjourned.
Metroid. I might be too tired to do it now. I was gonna play during this, but this was so good I didn't want to fucking. I wanted to
Cassidy
pay attention
Hutchinson
to it.
now,
Yeah,
about
this
to
was
leave the room as the
really
cameras
good.
click. It has been, frankly, an incredible journey today. From
July.
shocking to
Oh,
sinister,
okay.
ending with that suggestion of those who may be trying to influence the testimony of witnesses. People
Yeah,
with
witness
perhaps
intimidation.
vested interest in the outcome of this hearing. But This is a name that most people didn't know. A lot of people will know after some of the shocking testimony that she offered today. The January 6th committee bringing to a close a hearing that had some of the most explosive allegations we've heard so far.
Explosive.
The second part of today is focusing
West
on
Coast
President
shit.
Trump's reaction to the rioters breaching the Capitol, according to 25-year-old former White House aide Cassidy Hutchinson.
I'm gonna explode.
Mr. Trump said of the hang Mike Pence chance that maybe Mike deserved it. She also described a president resistant to take action to get the rioters to stand down. Earlier, Hutchinson testified that President Trump knew the rioters had weapons, but still encouraged them to march on the Capitol.
Mascopium calling for her head on a
so
pike.
strongly,
Oh,
he needed to go with the rally goers.
I'm sure
that
it's
he
already.
forcibly tried to grab the steering wheel from the Secret Service agent
Yeah,
driving
he
him
tried to
and
grab the
lunged at a
steering
member
wheel
of his security
from the
detail.
Secret Service
It's being,
agent.
again,
Like,
checked
no,
out NBC's political
we're going to the
director and moderator of
Capitol.
Meet the Press. Chuck, I recall after the last hearing you said that
Oh,
might be the most
shit,
significant.
dude.
I assume this goes to the top of the heap.
What a stupid son of a bitch.
Dude, who the fuck's called me at this time?
Absolutely. Look, this lived up to the
The
hype of what I
fuck
had been told
on
about
outta
this witness.
here.
This is, you want to make the John Dean comparisons, that was former President Richard Nixon.
That's what I do
White
when my
House
phone
counsel,
rings.
who testified publicly, and it really broke open that investigation. This feels that compelling. We're going to find out if it does open the floodgates.
I'm
to
gonna
more
drive.
to talk. Whether it's Pat Cipollone, the White House counsel, whether it is the chief of staff, Mark Meadows, who was
God.
fighting this, and
What a
will be
stupid
held,
son of a bitch.
criminally liable for not participating in this. Boy, I'll tell you,
Dude, we need this as a fucking
Donald
sound
Trump was
effect.
probably
What a
Mark
stupid
Meadows. I
son
mean,
of
he
a bitch.
really was painted as a very ineffectual person, a bit of a flunky
I
to
love
the
that.
president, a true believer who either was paralyzed
A flunky?
or, by what was happening in the moment, torn between his loyalty to the president and perhaps what he was watching for whatever reason, but his inaction is pretty damning at the end of this.
Damning.
But look, here's to me the question I would ask so many Republican senators now, knowing then
call me
what
at
you
this
know
time
now
of
about
night,
the
yeah.
president's actions, how would you have voted at the impeachment trial? Or to the cabinet secretaries. It was Mike Pence who apparently called off the
me
25th
at this
Amendment
time of
trial.
night. What the
Again,
fuck?
if you knew the president attacked a Secret Service agent, if you knew the president, all of his actions that he was unwilling to
He
take,
attacked
if
the
you knew
Secret
chief of
Service
staff
agent.
had asked for a pardon in advance, how would you
Ghislaine got 20
how
years?
would you have conducted yourself?
Wait,
this is
that trial's still
she,
going on?
I think broke open and put to rest any of the bizarre spin people have tried
I'm
to put
glad
on
we
this to
watched
defend
this
the
together
president, stuff getting
too,
out of hand, they didn't know,
Mitski.
et cetera, et cetera.
Oh.
This, to me, that we'll know the effectiveness
It
of
was
this testimony in a couple
fun.
weeks by how many new witnesses come forward. But I got to think she's going to open the floodgates.
I'm gonna think.
Yeah, let me turn to Peter Alexander. Peter, you've spent so much time in the
Peter.
White House, so you could understand these descriptions.
Peter
of
Pan
proximity,
sexual.
where the Oval Office was, and where the chief of staff was. So you're seeing a picture many of us really don't have. Try to take us into the moment of what stood out to you.
Well, what
Take
stood
us
out to
in,
me,
Peter.
First of all, is that you have a 25-year-old who's standing in front of the
I'm gonna
president
think.
communicating this message about Donald Trump, covering his presidency from day one. You and I both remember how many times he would dismiss
Amazing.
some reporting we had.
Mira.
It was described as a source familiar with the matter, or a White House official. He said these are all made-up sources.
Mira,
now you have
hey,
a source
cutie.
on the record testifying.
Yeah,
before
Peter
the
Pan
world.
sexual,
This
baby.
is what I witnessed. This is what I heard. This is what I saw. And what's striking to me as we have this conversation is, as long as it took President Trump to respond to the riot on the Capitol that day, 187 minutes before his first
Amazing.
tweet, it didn't take him nearly that long to respond to Cassidy Hutchinson on his social media
I
site. The
know.
president has
I'm
tweeted
so
out
glad
multiple
too.
times, not surprisingly, attacking Miss
I'm
Hutchinson,
gonna
saying
come,
that I
Jar.
know who this person, Cassidy Hutchinson.
Yeah, I love
is.
that
He
emo
calls her a
too.
phony and a
Jinx is
leaker. He says
Coach
that she tried to get a job at Mar-a-Lago after his term was up. As for the story about
dude,
him
I
trying
love
to grab
Mafia,
the
Jinx.
steering wheel, he describes that as fake, says it was sick and fraudulent, like in his words, the unselect committee here. But the president doesn't lash out, as we know, unless he's furious about something. He's clearly furious about this. And what I'm also hearing is from some of those who also worked in that White House. Sarah Matthews today, it's a name that may be familiar. She was one of the deputy press secretaries. She was there on January 6th.
Matthews.
She's another individual who resigned on that day because she said she simply couldn't handle what she had seen. She stood up for her friend Cassidy Hutchinson as a woman of courage and a woman of honesty, and she said to all of those in my old world, in the MAGA world, who complained that this is hearsay, I'm sure the committee would like to hear from you like they heard from her under oath. I agree with Chuck. The question is, will other individuals come forward now that she has communicated their story, if they won't do it on their own behalf?
Trump already lashing out.
Someone could either corroborate
what on Truth Social?
What she had to say on a direct basis. Danny, let me ask you.
Mathematical.
Past the 6th to the 7th, this question about whether the president should do a speech is.
I'm gonna math.
Insiders saying yes, you have to do it. The 25th Amendment seems to be the carrot in this case, or the potential stick.
It does, but the 25th Amendment has so many fail-safes, so many opportunities.
Doesn't have Twitter to lash out. I know he has Truth Social, though.
Very, very difficult to
He's gonna be lashing out on Truth Social
to effectively remove or temporarily remove a president. So while that may have been discussed as an option, the point I'm trying to make
yeah, remember he couldn't even pronounce it.
Use it to temporarily remove a president.
He couldn't even pronounce Truth, his own goddamn
among the cabinet. With the
fucking website name.
That this was even a discussion means they had at least a head count. I mean, it is so easy.
I forget how he said it, but it was so funny. We watched it on here.
Get to a conversation about could we do this means you already had enough people who are really thinking about it. That's how difficult it is.
Have ketchup, yeah, dude. He's gonna throw the ketchup.
Never come up, at least in its.
Oh man, that was so fun.
For medical procedures and otherwise, but not like this. Never like this.
Not like this.
He's outside the hearing room right now. Allie, of course, there's been so many moments in this hearing, and at times I found myself wondering.
Allie in HD.
What are they doing right now in the chambers? Perhaps you can offer that color.
Amazing. Yeah, this was amazing.
This entire building is wrapped by these hearings, not just inside the hearing room where, as I mentioned earlier, this one really felt different. The gravity of the situation, the way that no one who was in that hearing room wanted to take their eyes off the screen or their ears
How do I say? Do not come.
Because they
yeah.
they would miss something. And
I want to make a Truth Social too.
Packed a new punch in terms of telling us something that we didn't know before.
Packed a new punch.
Chairman Thompson there speaking at the microphones, and I think he did something today that really struck me, which is he spoke at the end of this hearing the way that he talks to me and others here in the hall, with that edge in his voice, almost daring people. If you've already talked to us and you might have forgotten something, or if you've gained some courage watching a former colleague of yours testify about what was going on in the White House, their doors are still open.
Testify, kick a hole right in the sky.
This committee has shown that it has, willing to throw out their plans in order to put this kind of testimony
this was something else.
Into the record and into the public view.
Spilly, what the fuck did you think about all this? That's what I want to know. Spilly, what were you thinking? Damn, Spilly! Calm down. Okay, Spilly. Jeez.
Bruh.
Wow. Spilly Spillums, everybody.